Pathetic. Look at her, shaking like a leaf in a storm. You actually think the world cares about your little envelope, Grandma? A heavy car door slamming, the crinkle of paper being snatched. Please, that's from my granddaughter. She's sick. Save the sob story for someone who buys it. This is evidence now. Civil forfeiture, sweetheart. It's the law. Now get your broke, crying self out of here before I find a reason to put cuffs on those brittle wrists. They thought she was just another helpless victim. They thought the badge made them gods. They took her life savings and laughed about it over beers, but they made one fatal calculation error. They didn't check who her son was. They didn't know that by stealing $10,000, they just signed their own death warrants. Welcome to the story of how the FBI's most feared operative came home. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Hope Carter adjusted her glasses, peering through the rhythmic swipe of her windshield wipers. Her 2011 Honda Civic rattled as it hit a pothole on the outskirts of the 4th Ward. Her hands, weathered by 40 years of scrubbing floors and raising children, gripped the steering wheel tight. Tonight, however, the tightness wasn't from arthritis. It was from fear, mixed with a fragile, fluttering hope. In her purse, sitting on the passenger seat, was a thick white envelope. It contained $12,000 in cash. It wasn't drug money. It wasn't gambling winnings. It was 10 years of Social Security checks scrimped, aluminum cans collected, and birthdays skipped. It was for Ariana Young, her granddaughter, whose scoliosis surgery had been denied by insurance for the 3rd time. Tomorrow morning, Hope was meeting the specialist who demanded cash up front to book the operating room. Blue and red lights exploded in her rearview mirror. Hope's heart hammered against her ribs. She checked her speedometer. She was doing 30 in a 35. She signaled, pulling over onto the muddy shoulder of the deserted industrial road. "Lord, please," she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. "Just a tail light. Let it just be a tail light." She rolled the window down as a flashlight beam cut through the darkness, blinding her. "License and registration," a voice barked. It wasn't a request. It was a command bored with its own authority. Hope squinted against the glare. "Is there a problem, officer? I was driving slow." "Get out of the car, ma'am." I have bad knees, officer. Is it necessary?" "I said, get out of the vehicle, now." The door was yanked open. A hand grabbed her arm, hard. Hope gasped, stumbling out into the cold rain. She looked up to see 2 figures. The one gripping her arm was Officer Damian Banks. He was tall, thick-necked, with a buzz cut that did nothing to hide the cruelty in his eyes. His partner, Officer Nicholas Bennett, stood by the squad car, hand resting nervously on his holster. "We have probable cause to believe there are narcotics in this vehicle," Banks lied, his voice flat. He didn't even try to make it sound convincing. "Narcotics?" Hope's voice trembled. "I'm 72 years old. I'm a deaconess at First Baptist. I don't—" "Stop resisting," Banks snapped, spinning her around and shoving her against the wet metal of her car. He patted her down roughly, his hands lingering too long, invading her dignity. "Bennett, toss the car." "Damien, come on. She's an old lady," Bennett muttered, though he moved to the passenger side anyway. "Profile fits, Bennett. Old car, bad neighborhood, nervous driver. Just look." Hope watched in horror as Bennett opened her purse. He pulled out her Bible, dropping it onto the wet floor mat. Then he found the envelope. "Bingo," Bennett said, holding it up. Banks released Hope and snatched the envelope. He ripped the top open, whistling as he thumbed through the stack of $100 bills. "That's for my granddaughter," Hope screamed, lunging forward. "Please, that's for her surgery. It took me 10 years. Banks placed a hand on her chest and shoved. Hope fell back, landing hard in the mud. The cold wetness seeped instantly into her Sunday dress. 10 grand in cash? Banks sneered, tucking the envelope into his tactical vest. "This is drug proceeds, ma'am. We're seizing it under civil asset forfeiture laws. If you want it back, you can file a claim. Prove you didn't sell crack to get it. I have withdrawal slips. I have the bank book. Hope sobbed, trying to stand but slipping in the mud. You can't do this. It's theft. Banks leaned down, his face inches from hers. The smell of stale coffee and arrogance rolled off him. It's police work. And if you keep running that mouth, I'll book you for assaulting an officer. Imagine how you'd do in holding at your age. Please, she whimpered, her spirit breaking. Please, sir. Have mercy. Mercy is for the innocent, Banks said, turning his back on her. Bennett, let's go. We've got paperwork to ignore. They got into their cruiser. The engine roared. They didn't even wait for her to get up. They sped off, spraying mud over her, leaving an elderly woman kneeling on the side of the road, the rain mixing with the tears on her face. She had lost everything in 3 minutes. But as Hope Carter wept, she didn't call the police station. She didn't call a lawyer. With shaking fingers, she reached into her pocket for her flip phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in 2 years. A number that didn't go to a house, but to a satellite phone somewhere across the ocean. The phone vibrated across a steel table in a dimly lit safe house in Prague. Jace Ellington sat perfectly still. He was shirtless, revealing a roadmap of scars across a torso carved from granite. He was stitching a laceration on his own forearm, the needle passing through skin with mechanical precision. He didn't flinch. Jace was a man who didn't exist. To the public, Jace Ellington was a logistics consultant for an import-export firm. To the select few at the top of the FBI's National Security Branch, he was Asset 9, a ghost. The man sent in to dismantle cartels, extract hostages from hostile nations, and silence domestic terrorists when the law required flexibility. The phone buzzed a third time. Jace stopped stitching. Only 3 people had this number: his director, his handler, Melody North, and his mother. He picked it up. Mom? The silence on the other end was heavy, filled with a jagged, wet breathing that made the hair on Jace's arms stand up. Jace? Her voice was a cracked whisper. Jace, baby. Mom, are you hurt? Jace's voice changed instantly. The cold, metallic tone of the operative vanished, replaced by the urgency of a son. Talk to me. Where are you? I'm on the side of Route 41, by the old textile plant. They took it, Jace. They took all of it. Ariana's money. Who took it? Was it a robbery? Jace was already moving. He hit a button on his wrist comms, putting the call on speaker while he began packing his gear. One hand grabbed a passport, the other a suppressed Glock 19. The police, Hope sobbed. 2 of them. They said it was drug money. They pushed me in the mud, Jace. They laughed at me. Jace froze. His hand hovered over a stack of euros. They pushed you? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I'm okay, I think. Just bruises. But the surgery is tomorrow. I can't pay for it now. I failed her, Jace. I failed Ariana. Mom, listen to me. Jace's voice was terrifyingly calm. Get in the car. Lock the doors. Do not speak to anyone. I am coming. You're in Europe, baby. It'll take too long. I am coming, he repeated. Go to Auntie Willow's house. I'll be there by morning. Jace hung up. He dialed a second number. Ellington? The voice of Melody North, a senior analyst at FBI headquarters in D.C., was sharp. You're supposed to be dark for another 48 hours. The Serbians are still looking for you. I need a flight. O'Hare, now. Jace, you're in the middle of an op. The director will have your head. My mother was assaulted and robbed by Chicago PD officers, Jace said. He pulled on a black tactical jacket, checking the chamber of his weapon before holstering it. If you don't get me a jet, I will fly commercial. And if I fly commercial, I'll be armed. And if TSA stops me, I will cause an international incident that will end your career and the director's. Get the jet. There was a pause. There. Melody knew Jace. She knew that he wasn't making threats. He was stating facts. Wings up in 30 minutes at the private airfield, Melody said, her voice softening. Jace, don't do anything stupid. These are cops. No, Jace said, walking out into the Prague night. They aren't cops, they're targets. 8 hours later, Jace stood in the living room of Willow Morrison's small bungalow on the south side of Chicago. The house smelled of lavender and old timber. Hope sat on the sofa, wrapped in a quilt, holding a cup of tea. Her knee was wrapped in an ace bandage, and there was a dark purple bruise blooming on her forearm where Banks had grabbed her. Ariana Young, Jace's niece, sat beside her. She was 16, wearing a back brace that made her movements stiff. She looked at her uncle with wide, teary eyes. She hadn't seen him in 3 years. He looked different, harder. He seemed to take up all the oxygen in the room. I'm sorry, Uncle Jace, Ariana whispered. Grandma shouldn't have called you. Hush, Jace said gently. He knelt before his mother, taking her bruised hand in his. His thumbs traced the dark mark on her skin. His eyes, usually scanning for exits and threats, were filled with a profound sorrow that quickly hardened into volcanic rage. Did you get their names? Jace asked softly. Banks, Hope said, staring into her tea. The name tag said Banks, and the other one, Bennett, I think. Jace stood up. He walked to the window, peering out through the blinds. A black SUV was parked down the street. Jackson Walker, his childhood friend who ran security for the neighborhood, was keeping watch. I went to the precinct this morning, Hope said. The desk sergeant said there was no record of a seizure. He said if I file a false report against officers, they'd arrest me. Of course there's no record, Jace said. He pulled out a sleek military-grade tablet from his bag. Because they didn't log it into evidence. They split it. How do you know? Willow asked, standing in the kitchen doorway. Because men like that are predictable. They're scavengers. Jace tapped the screen. He initiated a secure video link. Melody North's face appeared. I'm here, Melody said. I've been digging since you took off. You were right. Officer Damian Banks and Officer Nicholas Bennett, 4th Ward Patrol. Jace, their financials are a mess, but also strange. Elaborate, Jace said, turning the screen so only he could see it. Banks is on a cop's salary, about $75,000 a year. But 3 months ago, he put a down payment on a lake house in Michigan. Bennett has gambling debts, heavy ones. Online poker sites based in Malta. But every few weeks his debts get cleared in lump sums. Cash deposits. They're shaking down the locals, Jace muttered. Preying on people who can't fight back. Immigrants, the elderly. People with past records. There's more. Melody hesitated. I pulled the dash cam logs for their cruiser for last night. The camera was manually disabled at 8:15 p.m., right before your mom was stopped, and the GPS transponder malfunctioned for 20 minutes. It's a crew, Jace said. 2 patrol cops don't turn off GPS without a supervisor knowing. Who's their sergeant? Sergeant Miller. But the chain of command goes straight to Chief Isaac Jennings. Jace, Jennings is untouchable. He's the media darling. Cleaned up the streets, they say. Jace looked back at his mother. She looked so small. She had worked her hands to the bone to save that money, and Banks had spent it in his mind before he even got back to his cruiser. Nobody is untouchable, Jace said. What are you going to do? Melody asked. We can launch an internal affairs investigation, but it will take months. The money will be gone. I don't want an investigation, Jace said. I want their lives. He closed the laptop. He turned to Hope and Ariana. Ariana, Jace said, pack a bag. You and Grandma are going to stay at a hotel downtown, the Four Seasons. I've already booked it under a corporate alias. Jace, we can't afford, Hope started. It's paid for. I have work to do here. Jace, Hope said, her voice trembling. Don't kill anyone, please. I raised you better. Jace walked over and kissed her forehead. He didn't promise not to kill anyone. He simply said, I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone again. Later that night, the rain had returned. Jace sat in a rented sedan parked 2 blocks away from a dive bar called the Blue Shield. It was a known cop hangout. He was wearing a gray hoodie and a baseball cap, blending in with the shadows. He watched through a long-range directional microphone and thermal binoculars. Damian Banks stumbled out of the bar, laughing loudly. He was with Nicholas Bennett. "I'm telling you, the boat is happening," Banks shouted, slapping Bennett on the back. 10 grand, easy money. That old hag probably didn't even know what hit her. "I don't know, Dame," Bennett mumbled, looking over his shoulder. I don't know. What if she has family?" "Family?" Banks laughed, the sound grating in Jace's earpiece. "She's a nobody from the projects. Her family is probably in jail or dead. We run this city, Nick. Don't forget that." Jace watched them get into Banks's personal truck, a lifted Ford F-150 that cost more than a cop should be able to afford. Jace picked up his phone. He texted Melody. "Initiate Phase 1. Freeze their assets. But don't just freeze them. Make it look like a glitch." He started his car. He didn't follow them. Not yet. Tonight wasn't about confrontation. Tonight was about fear. He drove to Banks's house. It was a nice suburban home, far away from the neighborhood he terrorized. Jace parked down the street. He moved through the shadows like smoke, bypassing the alarm system with a pocket EMP device. He slipped inside the house. It was empty. Banks was still at the bar. Jace didn't steal anything. He walked into the kitchen. On the counter was a stack of bills and a letter from the bank approving a loan for the lake house. Jace took out a single photograph he had brought with him. It was a picture of Hope Carter, smiling at a church picnic. He placed it squarely on top of the loan papers. Then he took a combat knife from his belt. He didn't stab the table. Instead, he opened the fridge, took out a carton of milk, and left it on the counter, uncapped. He turned the thermostat up to 90 degrees. He turned every picture frame in the living room face down. Psychological warfare. He wanted Banks to come home and feel that something was wrong, that his sanctuary had been breached. As Jace slipped back out into the night, his phone buzzed. "Melody, it's done. Banks's credit cards will be declined starting at midnight. Bennett's gambling account has been flagged for fraud." Jace smiled, a cold, humorless expression. Let the games begin. He faded into the darkness, the hunter finally on the prowl. The police thought they were the predators. They had no idea they had just stepped into the cage with the lion. Morning light in the suburbs usually brought peace, but for Officer Damian Banks, it brought a suffocating heat. He woke up gasping, his sheets soaked in sweat. The air in his bedroom was thick, heavy, and hot. He kicked off the covers, his head pounding from the whiskey the night before. He glanced at the thermostat on the wall. It read 90 degrees. "What the hell?" Banks muttered, stumbling out of bed. "Damn piece of junk." He walked into the kitchen, his bare feet sticking to the linoleum. The silence of the house felt heavy, oppressive. He reached for the refrigerator handle, eager for cold water, but stopped. On the kitchen island, sitting perfectly in the center of the granite countertop, was a carton of milk. It was open. The smell hit him instantly, sour, curdled, rotten. It had been sitting out all night in the artificially heated house. Next to the milk was a piece of paper. Banks froze. He lived alone. He had locked the doors. He had set the alarm. He walked over to the counter, his hand instinctively reaching for the service weapon he had left on the table. It was there. He gripped it, spinning around, clearing the room. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I'm a police officer. Show yourself." Silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator. He turned back to the paper. It wasn't a note. It was a photograph. A simple, 4x6 glossy print of an elderly black woman smiling at a church picnic. She was holding a plate of potato salad, looking at the camera with warmth and kindness. Banks squinted. The face was familiar. It took a moment for the alcohol fog to clear, and then it hit him like a punch to the gut. It was the old woman from Route 41, the one he had shoved into the mud. "No way," he whispered. "No way." He looked under the photo. It was sitting on top of his loan approval letter for the lake house. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his hangover. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing was missing. His TV was there. His laptop was there. This was a message. Someone had been in his house while he slept. Someone who knew about the woman. Someone who knew about the lake house. His phone rang, shattering the silence. Banks jumped, nearly firing his weapon into the ceiling. He grabbed the phone. It was Bennett. "Damien," Bennett's voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysteria. "My accounts. They're gone." "Calm down, Nick. What are you talking about?" "My checking, my savings, the Cayman account. It's all showing zero, Damien, and I just got an email. It says I donated $50,000 to the Coalition for Victims of Police Brutality. I didn't do that. I can't even buy gas." Banks felt the blood drain from his face. "Get to the precinct. Now." An hour later, Banks stood at the counter of a coffee shop 2 blocks from the 4th Ward station. He needed caffeine before he faced the day. He placed his order and tapped his debit card on the reader. Beep. Declined. The barista, a young woman with blue hair, looked at him with mild pity. "Do you have another card, sir?" Banks felt the eyes of the line behind him. He pulled out his credit card. Platinum. Beep. Declined. "Sir, it says stolen card," the barista said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm supposed to confiscate it." "Give me that back." Banks snatched the card, his face burning red. He threw a crumpled $5 bill from his pocket onto the counter, the last cash he had on him, and stormed out without his coffee. He sat in his truck, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He checked his banking app. Locked. Security freeze due to suspicious activity. He called the bank. Automated message. "We are currently experiencing higher than normal call volumes. Your estimated wait time is 4 hours. "Who is doing this?" Banks roared, slamming his fist into the dashboard. High above, perched on the roof of a tenement building across the street, Jace Ellington lowered his binoculars. He sat cross-legged, the wind whipping his coat around him. On his tablet, he watched the live feed from the camera he had planted in Banks's truck the night before. "Stress levels rising," Jace noted calmly into his comms. "Heart rate is 140. He's rattled." "Don't play with your food, Jace," Melody's voice crackled in his ear. "We found the money, or at least the intake logs for where it should go." "Tell me." "They have a slush fund. An off-books locker at a storage facility in the industrial district. Store it right. Unit 404. It's registered to a shell company owned by Bennett's cousin. That's where they keep the cash before they launder it." "Is my mother's envelope there?" "Likely. They haven't had time to wash it yet. But Jace, there's something else. I ran a deep background on Chief Jennings. He's meeting with someone today at 2 p.m. A man named Sergei Volkov." Jace's eyes narrowed. "Volkov? The Russian Bratva lieutenant?" "The same. Why is a Chicago police chief meeting a Russian mobster?" "Because he's not just dirty," Jace said, standing up. "He's sold the city, and I'm about to foreclose." The Store It Right facility was a graveyard of rusty metal doors and flickering halogen lights. It was the kind of place where people kept things they wanted to forget, or things they didn't want anyone to find. Jace moved through the corridors like a shadow. He wore a maintenance uniform he'd swiped from a laundry truck, a cap pulled low over his eyes. He carried a mop bucket, but inside the bucket was a suppressed HKM P5 submachine gun and a set of lock-picking tools. He reached Unit 404. He didn't pick the lock. That would leave a trace. Instead, he used a fiber optic camera snake, sliding it under the gap in the metal door. Inside, 3 men were sitting around a folding table. Stacks of cash were piled high. But it wasn't just cash. There were clear plastic bags filled with blue pills. Fentanyl. Jace zoomed in. One of the men was Nicholas Bennett. The other two were street-level dealers, tattoos climbing their necks. "I'm telling you, we need to move this fast," Bennett was saying, his leg bouncing nervously. "Something's wrong. My accounts are frozen. Banks is freaking out. He thinks the old lady put a hex on him or something." "You cops are soft," one of the dealers laughed, counting a stack of 20s. "It's probably just the bank's algorithm." "Relax. Did you bring the rest of the supply?" "Yeah." Bennett kicked a duffel bag on the floor. 10 kilos. From the bust on 5th Street yesterday. Chief wants his cut by tonight. Jace pulled the camera back. This wasn't just corruption. This was a distribution network. They were seizing drugs from rival gangs and selling them to their own protected dealers. The police were the biggest cartel in the city. Jace stood up. He could breach the door, drop all three of them, and take the money. But that was tactical, not strategic. He needed to burn the whole structure down. He took out a small canister from his belt. CS gas. He attached a timer. He placed it quietly by the ventilation vent near the floor. Then, he pulled the fire alarm on the wall. The sirens wailed, echoing through the metal corridors. Inside Unit 404, panic erupted. "Cops! Raid!" one dealer shouted. "We are the cops, you idiot!" Bennett yelled. "Grab the bags!" The door rolled up. Bennett and the two dealers stumbled out, coughing as the CS gas hissed into the hallway, blinding them. They were carrying the duffel bags of drugs and the box of cash. Jace was already gone. He watched from the catwalk above. As they ran toward the exit, they ran straight into the arms of the actual police. But not just any police. Jace had called in an anonymous tip to the state troopers, claiming an active shooter was in the facility. 6 state troopers, heavily armed, swept around the corner. "Drop the bags! Hands in the air!" Bennett froze. He was holding a bag of fentanyl. He was wearing his police uniform, but he was off duty, in a storage unit with known felons. "I'm an officer!" Bennett screamed, dropping the bag. "Don't shoot! I'm Officer Bennett! Get on the ground!" The troopers didn't care. They tackled him. Jace watched as they cuffed Bennett. He zoomed in with his phone camera, capturing the look of absolute terror on Bennett's face. One down, Jace thought. But the money wasn't in the box. He had seen the cash on the table. It was loose bills. His mother's envelope wasn't there. Banks must have kept it. Jace retreated, slipping out a side exit before the perimeter was secured. He had just cut off one head of the Hydra. Now, the beast would be angry. He got into his car and checked his phone. A text from Jackson Walker, his friend watching the house. "Jackson. Trouble. Banks just pulled up to your mom's house. He's got 2 other guys with him. They aren't in uniform." Jace's blood turned to ice. He slammed the car into gear, the tires screaming as he peeled out of the lot. "Hold them off, Jack," Jace growled. "I'm 10 minutes out." The rain had turned into a thunderstorm. Lightning flashed, illuminating the small bungalow where Hope Carter had raised a hero. Jackson Walker stood on the porch. He was a big man, a former linebacker, but he was unarmed. He crossed his massive arms as Banks and 2 plainclothes thugs walked up the driveway. "Can I help you, officers?" Jackson's voice was deep, rumbling like the thunder. "Move aside, boy," Banks spat, his hand resting on his hip. He looked unhinged. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform disheveled. The paranoia had eaten him alive. He needed to find the money, or the person who was destroying his life. He had convinced himself the old woman had something to do with it. "This is private property," Jackson said, not moving. "And Miss Hope isn't home." "We know she's at a hotel," Banks sneered. "We're here to execute a search warrant." "Let's see the paper." "I am the paper." Banks shoved Jackson. Jackson didn't budge. But the 2 men behind Banks pulled out batons. They weren't cops. They were hired muscle. "Beat him," Banks ordered. The two men lunged. Jackson threw a heavy right hook, knocking the first one down, but the second one swung the baton, cracking it against Jackson's knee. Jackson roared in pain, going down. Banks stepped over him. He kicked the front door open. "Tear it apart!" Banks yelled. "Find anything. Drugs, guns, I don't care. We need leverage." Banks stormed into the living room. He began sweeping ornaments off the shelves. He flipped the coffee table. He ripped the cushions off the sofa. He was looking for the envelope. He had realized in his panic that he had lost it, or someone had taken it from his truck. He thought maybe the old woman had stolen it back. It made no sense. But fear doesn't follow logic. Banks marched into Hope's bedroom. He pulled out the drawers, dumping her clothes on the floor. He grabbed a jewelry box, dumping out cheap costume pearls. Suddenly, the lights in the house went out. "What the hell?" Banks spun around. "Mike? Tony? Get the lights!" Silence. "Mike?" Banks pulled his gun. He clicked on the flashlight attachment. The beam cut through the dusty darkness. He walked into the hallway. Tony was lying on the floor, unconscious. His baton was snapped in half. Mike was gone. "Show yourself!" Banks screamed, his voice cracking. "I'll kill you!" A voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. It was deep, modulated, terrifying. "You broke the first rule, Damien. You don't touch the family." Banks spun toward the kitchen. A figure stood there, illuminated only by the flashes of lightning from the window. Jace Ellington. He wasn't wearing a mask. He wanted Banks to see his face. He wanted him to see the resemblance to the woman he had assaulted. "Who are you?" Banks raised his gun. Jace moved. He didn't run. He vanished. Banks fired. Bang! Bang! The shots tearing into the drywall. But Jace was already inside his guard. Jace's hand clamped over the slide of Banks's gun, jamming the mechanism. With his other hand, he struck Banks in the throat. Banks gagged, dropping the weapon, clutching his windpipe. Jace swept his leg, sending the corrupt cop crashing to the floor. Banks tried to crawl away, gasping for air. Jace stepped on his hand, crushing the fingers that had grabbed his mother. "My name is Jace Ellington," Jace said, his voice a low growl. "Hope Carter is my mother, and you made a very expensive mistake." Banks looked up, eyes bulging with terror. I didn't know. I can give it back. I have the money." "I don't want the money," Jace said. He reached down and hauled Banks up by his collar, slamming him against the wall. "I want your confession." Jace pulled out a syringe. "What is that?" Banks shrieked. "Truth serum? No, that's Hollywood," Jace said coldly. "This is a paralytic. It's going to make you feel like you're drowning for about 4 hours. You won't be able to move. You won't be able to speak. But you will hear everything." He jammed the needle into Banks's neck. Banks's eyes went wide. His body went rigid. He slid down the wall, frozen like a statue, staring blankly ahead. Jace leaned in close to his ear. "I'm going to leave you here, in the mess you made. But before I go, I'm going to make a phone call. Not to the police, to Sergei Volkov." Banks's pupils dilated in sheer horror. "I'm going to tell him that you and Bennett stole his shipment today, that you set up the raid to keep the product for yourselves. And since Bennett is in custody, Volkov is going to come looking for his partner." Jace stood up. He walked over to the unconscious thugs, zip-tied them, and dragged them out onto the lawn. He checked on Jackson, who was sitting up, nursing his knee. "You okay?" Jace asked. "Busted knee," Jackson grunted. "But I'll live." "Is he dead?" "Worse," Jace said. "He's bait." Jace took out Banks's phone. He found Volkov's number saved under the plumber. He sent a text. "I have the product. Bennett got caught. I'm cutting ties. Come to 424 Maple Street if you want your share. Come alone." Jace tossed the phone onto Banks's frozen lap. "Karma is a bitch, Damien," Jace whispered. "But the Russians, they're worse." Jace helped Jackson to the car. They drove away just as black SUVs with tinted windows began to turn onto the street. The police had failed to bring justice, so Jace had brought the underworld to do it for him. The storm that battered the windows of the penthouse on the 45th floor of the Millennium Spire wasn't just rain, it was a deluge, a violent cleansing that the city of Chicago desperately needed. Inside, however, the air was climate-controlled, scented with sandalwood and old money. Chief Isaac Jennings stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass, staring out at the grid of lights below. From up here, the 4th Ward, the neighborhood he was systematically bleeding dry, looked like nothing more than a dark smudge on a glowing canvas. Jennings took a slow sip of his 25-year-old Macallan. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit. He was a handsome man in a predatory way, with silver-streaked hair and a smile that had charmed voters and intimidated rivals for 2 decades. To the public, he was the Iron Chief, the man who brought crime rates down. To the underworld, he was the gatekeeper. Nothing moved in this city, drugs, guns, girls, without him getting a percentage. He turned back to his desk, a slab of imported mahogany that cost more than Hope Carter's entire house. His phone buzzed on the leather blotter. It was a text from Officer Bennett. Help. Raid. Storage unit. Banks is losing it. They have me. Jennings didn't frown. He didn't panic. He simply sighed, a sound of mild irritation, like a man who had found a lint spot on his jacket. He finished his drink, setting the crystal glass down on a coaster. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk, bypassing the Glock 17 to reach a burner phone taped to the underside. He dialed a number that didn't appear on any bill. "We have a containment breach," Jennings said, his voice smooth, devoid of empathy. "Bennett?" a distorted voice answered. "He's in holding at the 4th. He's weak. He'll talk to save his pension." Jennings picked up a gold letter opener, turning it over in his fingers. "Liquidate him. Make it look like a suicide. Belt in the cell? Bedsheet? I don't care. Just get it done before morning arraignment." "And Banks?" "Banks is a blunt instrument. Let him run. If he gets caught, he's unstable. Easy to discredit." Jennings hung up and snapped the burner phone in half, dropping the pieces into his wastebasket. He didn't feel a shred of guilt. In his world, people were either assets or liabilities. Bennett had crossed the line. He walked over to a large oil painting of the Chicago skyline that dominated the east wall. He pressed a hidden sensor in the frame. The painting slid aside with a soft hiss, revealing a heavy steel safe. He spun the dial. Left, right, left. Click. The door swung open. Inside was his real retirement fund. Stacks of cash, dollars, euros, Swiss francs, velvet pouches of uncut diamonds, passports with his face but different names, and right on top, sitting innocently on a stack of bearer bonds, was a crumpled white envelope. Jennings picked it up. He remembered Banks handing it to him earlier that day, sweating and bragging about the seizure from the old woman on Route 41. Jennings had laughed then. $10,000 was a rounding error to him. He spent that on suits. But he had taken it anyway. It was a tribute, a tithe from the weak to the strong. It reinforced the natural order of things. He tossed the envelope onto his desk. He would have his assistant deposit it into the slush fund tomorrow. Psst. The lights in the office flickered. Jennings paused. The Millennium Spire had its own generator. The lights never flickered. He looked at the security monitor on his desk. It cycled through the feeds. Lobby, elevator, hallway. The lobby feed was static. The elevator feed was black. The hallway feed showed his 2 private security guards. Ex-Navy SEALs he paid 6 figures a year. They weren't standing at their posts. They were slumped over in their chairs, heads lolling onto their chests. Jennings felt a cold prickle of genuine fear crawl up his spine. He reached under his desk for the silent panic button that alerted the SWAT team directly. "I wouldn't," a voice said. It didn't come from the door. It came from the shadows in the corner of the room, near the heavy velvet drapes. Jennings spun around, his hand hovering near the drawer with the gun. "Who's there? Show yourself," I cut the hard line. The voice continued, calm, deep, and terrifyingly resonant. I jammed the cellular signal, and your guards, they're just sleeping for now. A figure stepped out of the darkness. Jace Ellington looked like a wraith born from the storm outside. He was soaked, his black tactical gear dripping water onto the expensive Persian rug. His face was a mask of calculated violence. He didn't look like a cop. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like an executioner. "You must be the son," Jennings said, his composure recovering through sheer force of will. He was a narcissist. He couldn't conceive of a situation he couldn't talk his way out of. "Banks mentioned the old woman had family. I assume you're here to beg for the money back? Or perhaps to file a complaint?" Jennings chuckled, walking slowly back behind his desk to put the heavy wood between him and the intruder. "Let me save you the trouble. You're trespassing. I can shoot you right now, and the law will pin a medal on my chest." "I'm not here to beg," Jace said, taking a step forward. The water squelched in his boots, the only sound in the room. "And I'm not here for the money. I'm here for the resignation." Jennings laughed out loud. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Resignation? Son, do you have any idea who I am? I am this city. I have judges in my pocket. I have senators on speed dial. I dine with the mayor and drink with the cartel bosses. You break into my house, you threaten me. You're a dead man walking. I snap my fingers and you cease to exist." "You ran this city," Jace corrected, his voice dropping an octave. "Past tense." Jace pulled a small, disc-shaped device from his pocket and tossed it onto the mahogany desk. It slid across the polished surface, stopping inches from Jennings' hand. "What is this?" "Your life," Jace said. The device hummed and projected a holographic display into the air. It wasn't just a map, it was a web. Red lines connected the 4th Ward precinct to the storage unit, to the Russian mob hangouts, to offshore accounts in the Caymans and Zurich. "I've been busy," Jace said, his eyes locking onto Jennings. "While you were drinking your Macallan and ordering hits on your own men, I was scrubbing your digital footprint. I have the audio of you ordering Bennett's death 5 minutes ago. I have the ledger from the safe behind the painting. I have the emails between you and the cartels regarding the fentanyl distribution routes." Jennings's face went pale. The arrogance began to evaporate, replaced by the desperate, clammy sweat of a trapped animal. He looked at the hologram, seeing his entire empire laid bare. This is illegal surveillance," Jennings stammered, grasping at straws. "It's inadmissible in court." "I'm not a cop," Jace said coldly, "and this isn't for court. This file is encrypted. It is currently set to auto-upload to the FBI director, the DEA, the New York Times, and—" Jace checked his watch. "Sergei Volkov's private server in exactly 3 minutes. Jennings's eyes widened in true horror. "Volkov? He knows you were planning to cut him out of the shipment," Jace lied smoothly. "Or at least, the doctored emails I planted make it look that way. Prison is one thing, Chief. But the Russians? They don't do trials." Jennings looked at the safe, then at Jace. He realized the walls were closing in. He decided to try the one tool that had never failed him: greed. "We can make a deal," Jennings said, his voice trembling. He gestured to the open safe. "There's $5 million in there. Cash. Diamonds. Take it all. Walk away. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of and live like a king. I can make you rich. I can make you powerful." Jace stopped. He looked at the open safe, then at the white envelope on the desk. "You still don't get it," Jace whispered. The sound was more frightening than a scream. "You took $12,000 from a 72-year-old grandmother. You took her dignity. You made her beg in the mud. You think you can buy your way out of that?" "It was just business," Jennings screamed, losing control. "No," Jace said. "It was personal." Jace closed the distance. Jennings panicked. He ripped the drawer open, his hand closing around the grip of the Glock. He brought it up, desperate to kill the ghost in front of him. Jace didn't even flinch. He moved with a speed that defied physics. As the gun cleared the desk, Jace's left hand shot out, catching the slide. He twisted the weapon, the metal grinding, and wrenched it from Jennings's grip. With his right hand, Jace grabbed Jennings by the throat and slammed him backward. Jennings crashed into his high-backed leather chair, the force of the impact toppling it. He hit the floor hard, gasping for air. Jace stood over him, the stolen Glock in his hand. He ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and tossed the pieces aside. He reached down, grabbing Jennings by his expensive silk tie, and hauled him up. He slammed the chief face first into the mahogany desk. Crack. Jennings' nose shattered, blood spraying across the polished wood and the white envelope. "The upload is finished," Jace said into the silence of the room. You ruined me." Jennings wheezed, blood pooling under his cheek. "I built this city. I am a god here." "No," Jace said. He picked up the white envelope. He checked the contents. The money was all there. "You're just a thief with a badge, and I'm the consequences." Jace released him. Jennings slid to the floor, a broken, sobbing mess. Jace walked to the door. He paused, looking back at the man who had terrorized his community for years. "Oh, and Chief? The FBI isn't the only one coming. I unlocked the elevator. Volkov's men are in the lobby. I think they want a word about their missing shipment." Jace opened the door and vanished back into the shadows, leaving Chief Jennings alone with his blood, his money, and the sound of the elevator dings getting closer and closer. Jace sat in his car outside the penthouse, watching the police cruisers swarm the building. He saw Melody's team, FBI agents in windbreakers, storming the lobby. He saw Jennings being led out in handcuffs, looking small and defeated. Jace looked at the envelope in his passenger seat. Mission accomplished. But his phone buzzed. It was a proximity alert from the sensors he had left around his mother's neighborhood. Alert. Multiple hostiles detected. Sector 4. Jace tapped the screen. The camera feed from Hope's porch, where he had left Banks, flickered to life. Banks was gone. The zip ties were cut. Standing on the porch was a mountain of a man in a long leather trench coat. Sergei Volkov. He was surrounded by 6 heavily armed men. Volkov was holding Banks up by the throat. Banks, the paralytic wearing off enough for him to twitch, looked like a weeping child. "He says the ghost did this," Volkov rumbled, his voice picked up by the microphone. "He says the ghost set us up." Volkov threw Banks onto the lawn like a bag of trash. He turned to the camera, staring directly into the lens as if he knew Jace was watching. "You want to play games, little ghost?" Volkov said. "You take my money, you take my partner. Now I take your home." Volkov signaled his men. One of them pulled out a Molotov cocktail. Another racked a slide on an AK-47. "Burn it," Volkov ordered. "Burn the whole block. Flush him out." Jace's grip on the steering wheel tightened until the leather creaked. He had calculated that Volkov would take Banks and leave. He hadn't calculated that Volkov would declare war on the neighborhood to save face. Jace had the money. He could leave. His mom was safe at the hotel. The house was just wood and brick, but it wasn't just a house. It was the place where Mrs. Higgins next door baked pies. It was where Mr. Henderson taught kids to fix bikes. It was his home. "Melody!" Jace barked into his comms. "I need air support. Sector 4. "Negative, Jace." Melody's voice was frantic. "We're securing Jennings. I can't divert tactical units to a residential area based on a hunch. You need to stand down. You're exposed." "I'm not exposed," Jace said, revving the engine of his rental car. "I'm angry." He slammed the car into gear. He was 20 minutes away. He made it in 9. The street was a war zone. One house was already burning. Thankfully, an abandoned board-up 2 doors down from Hope's. But the Russians were moving toward Hope's house. Jackson Walker was there. Despite his busted knee, the big man was crouched behind a parked car, firing a handgun he'd pulled from somewhere. He was pinning the Russians down, but he was outgunned. "Give it up!" Volkov shouted, firing a burst from a submachine gun that shattered the windshield of Jackson's cover. Jace didn't stop. He floored the accelerator. He drove his sedan straight through the wooden fence of the backyard, drifting across the wet grass, and smashed through the side wall of the garage. The crash stunned the Russians. Jace kicked the door open, rolling out before the car stopped moving. He was a blur of motion. He double-tapped the first gunman in the chest. Thwip, thwip. The man dropped. He tossed a flashbang grenade into the center of the group. Bang! A blinding white light turned the night into day. Jace moved through the chaos. He wasn't fighting, he was dancing. He disarmed a thug with a knife hand to the wrist, spun him around, and used him as a human shield against Volkov's fire. "Jackson, get back!" Jace yelled. "I ain't leaving!" Jackson roared, firing 2 shots that took down a Russian flanking them. Volkov, realizing his men were dropping, roared in frustration. He dropped his gun and pulled a massive combat knife. He charged Jace. It was a clash of titans. Volkov was strong, a bear of a man. He slashed at Jace, the blade tearing through Jace's tactical jacket, drawing blood on his shoulder. Jace didn't grunt. He pivoted, using Volkov's momentum against him. He grabbed Volkov's wrist, twisted, and drove his elbow into the Russian's solar plexus. Volkov stumbled, gasping. "You think you are soldier?" Volkov spat blood. "You are nothing!" "I'm a son," Jace said. Jace delivered a spinning kick to Volkov's jaw. The sound was like a gunshot. Volkov hit the pavement, unconscious before he landed. Silence fell over the street. The rain hissed against the burning house nearby. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real police. The FBI. Jace looked at Jackson. The big man was bleeding from a graze on his arm, but he was smiling. "You still got it, Jace," Jackson wheezed. "You too, Jack." Jace walked over to where Damian Banks was lying in the grass. The corrupt cop was sobbing, curled in a fetal ball. He had watched the entire thing. He had seen a single man dismantle a Spetsnaz squad. Jace knelt down. He placed the white envelope on Banks's chest. "What?" Banks stammered. "This is evidence," Jace said. "When the FBI gets here, you're going to give them this. You're going to tell them Jennings made you take it. You're going to turn state's evidence." I will, I promise." "Good," Jace stood up. "Because if you don't, I'll come back." Jace looked at the flashing lights approaching. He couldn't be here. He was a ghost. He nodded to Jackson. He disappeared into the darkness between the houses, vanishing as quickly as he had arrived. 3 days later, the sun was shining on Chicago. It was a crisp, clean light. Hope Carter sat in the waiting room of Northwestern Memorial Hospital. She was wearing her best Sunday hat. Beside her sat Melody North. "The doctor says she's doing great," Melody said gently. "The surgery was a complete success. Ariana will be walking without the brace in 6 months." Hope wiped a tear from her eye. "Praise God, and praise, well, whoever paid for it." "An anonymous donor," Melody smiled. "The hospital received a wire transfer from a Swiss account. It covered everything. The surgery, the rehab, even a college fund." "And the police?" Hope asked, lowering her voice. "It's all over the news, Hope. Chief Jennings is in federal custody without bail. Officer Bennett took a plea deal, 20 years. And Officer Banks, well, he's in witness protection, but rumor has it he's terrified of his own shadow." Hope looked at the FBI agent. "And my son?" Melody hesitated. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, prepaid burner phone. "He wanted you to have this. He said he'll call when he can." Hope took the phone, clutching it like a lifeline. "Is he safe?" "He's Jace," Melody said. "The world isn't safe from him." The scene shifts to an airport lounge in Paris. Jace sat by the window, watching the planes take off. He was wearing a sharp suit reading a newspaper. The headline read, "Chicago Police Corruption Scandal. Chief Indicted, Mob Ring Smashed." He took a sip of espresso. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Director, good work, Asset 9. But you made a mess. We have a new assignment for you. Caracas, leave immediately." Jace deleted the message. He looked at the reflection in the glass. For a moment, he didn't see the operative. He just saw a man who had done the right thing. He picked up his bag. The ghost was back on the job. But this time, he walked a little lighter. The system was designed to crush people like Hope Carter. It relied on their silence, their fear, and their lack of power. But the system forgot one variable: family. Jace Ellington didn't just save his mother's money. He restored a community's faith that sometimes the bad guys lose. He proved that no badge, no title, and no amount of stolen cash can protect you when you cross the line. Justice isn't always lawful. Sometimes it's personal. And that is how the FBI's most lethal operative took down an entire corrupt police department for his mother. They took $12,000 and it cost them their freedom, their careers, and their empire. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. What would you do if someone messed with your family? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.